In recent years, Ukraine has gone from a country brimming with potential to the heart of a devastating conflict, where politics, military, and economics have all been twisted into dangerous weapons. To uncover who deserves the most credit for shattering Ukraine, we need to examine the issue through three main players: NATO, the Biden-Zelensky duo, and other NATO leaders. Let's take a look at each of these shining stars in this competition. First and foremost, we have NATO. When we think of NATO, we often picture a military alliance created for a noble purpose: to safeguard peace, security, and stability for its member nations. However, upon closer examination, especially through the lens of the Ukraine conflict, NATO's role becomes more questionable. This alliance not only protects its member states, but also actively seeks to expand its global influence, establishing itself as the center of power in a unipolar world. Ukraine, with its strategic location, has become an ideal pawn in this grand strategy. A perfect strategy to weaken Russia. Since the Cold War, NATO has continuously expanded beyond its initial goal of protecting Western Europe from the Soviet Union. Instead, this organization gradually encroached on areas within Russia's sphere of influence, despite their promise in the 1990s not to expand eastward. Expanding membership eastward, NATO has welcomed a series of Eastern European countries, from Poland, Hungary, to the Baltic states. This not only increased geopolitical pressure on Russia, but also significantly reduced the security buffer zone that is core to Moscow's defense strategy. Deployment of military bases. A series of NATO bases were established near the Russian border, turning Eastern Europe into a new front line. Tensions increased markedly as missile defense systems and modern military equipment were deployed closer and closer to Russian territory. Ukraine, a crucial pawn. Ukraine, with its strategic location right next to the Russian border, is a perfect target for NATO to both expand its influence and contain Russia. NATO invited Ukraine to participate in military cooperation programs, conducted joint exercises, and provided military aid even before the conflict broke out. This was the attractive but dangerous bait that Ukraine could not resist. When Russia reacted strongly to this expansion, NATO not only did not try to de-escalate but also used that reaction to paint Russia as an aggressor. In that picture, Ukraine was pushed into the role of victim, while NATO and Western countries became the protectors. However, behind that facade of moral high ground lies a sophisticated plan to drag Russia into a protracted war. Ukraine, from partner to victim. In their strategies to spread their influence, NATO continuously told Ukraine about security and prosperity. They said joining NATO would not only protect Ukraine from Russia, but also bring amazing economic and political growth, promising safety and a bright future. The invitation to join NATO and the EU was painted as a rosy picture, where Ukraine would become part of a community of democratic and successful countries. However, the truth is, this was just a trap to pull Ukraine away from Russia, its biggest economic and cultural partner. From the negotiating table to the battlefield, NATO wasn't just behind the political revolutions in Ukraine, but also actively pushed pro-Western governments to increase conflict with Russia. When the Crimea crisis exploded in 2014, NATO didn't just stand back, but increased military support for Ukraine, pushing the country into a conflict with no way out. Selling weapons instead of peace? Instead of helping everyone sit down and talk about peace, NATO turned Ukraine into the biggest potential customer for weapons manufacturers. The number of weapons going into Ukraine keeps growing, but in return there's only constant destruction across the country. A tragedy written by NATO. Once a country with potential for economic and cultural growth, Ukraine has become a battleground in a power struggle between Russia and NATO. The numbers don't lie. Millions of Ukrainians have been forced to flee their homes, thousands have been killed, and the country's economy is in ruins. Meanwhile, NATO just stands on the sidelines, selling weapons, condemning Russia, and proving that its presence is necessary to protect the free world. You could say NATO has played its role as screenwriter perfectly in the biggest military-political drama of the century. Ukraine, unfortunately, is the unwilling actor, pushed into the role of sacrificial lamb for the West's power ambitions. If NATO is the director of the tragic play called Ukraine, then the duo Biden-Zelensky are the lead actors who have taken this production to the peak of tragedy. With their calculated and well-coordinated performance, they have led Ukraine down a dead end, while simultaneously strengthening the positions of the US and NATO on the geopolitical chessboard. Biden, the puppet master. Behind the scenes. Joe Biden, a seasoned politician with decades of experience, has used all his skills to turn Ukraine into a strategic pawn in the long game against Russia. He is not just the President of the United States, but the conductor behind every major NATO decision. The godfather of aid packages under Biden's leadership, the U.S. has poured hundreds of billions of dollars in military and financial aid into Ukraine, turning the nation into a testing ground for advanced weaponry. Weapons like HIMARS, Javelin, or Patriot are not just tools of war, but symbols of Ukraine's dependence on the West, the plan to burn Ukraine. But these gifts don't come for free. The condition attached is that Ukraine must fight to the last drop of blood. Instead of promoting peace, Biden encourages an endless war, partly to drain Russia's resources, and partly to maintain a lucrative market for the U.S. defense industry. Europe, taking the heat for America. Biden has also cleverly shifted the burden onto the shoulders of his European allies, from pressuring EU nations to provide weapons and financial support to Ukraine, to bearing the brunt of the energy crisis caused by the cutoff of Russian supplies. Meanwhile, the U.S. stands aside, reaping the benefits of selling gas and weapons at exorbitant prices. Biden is not just a politician, but a brilliant strategist. Unfortunately, this strategy is not aimed at helping Ukraine develop, but rather turning it into a battleground for the U.S. and NATO to achieve their greater ambitions. Zelensky, the #1 general. If Biden is the puppet master, then President Volodymyr Zelensky is the one who executes those plans with finesse. From a comedian and TV producer, Zelensky has transformed into a political leader, praised in Western media, but a controversial one in his own country. Zelensky, the Pentagon's best salesman. Zelensky has proven his talent for fundraising and salesmanship by constantly appearing on international television, from the U.S. Congress and the European Parliament to major summits, to call for more weapons and money. His speeches are often perfectly staged, from his choice of clothing to the way he emphasizes Ukraine's pain, making it impossible for Western leaders to refuse. However, under Zelensky's leadership, Ukraine has suffered unprecedented losses. 30% of territory lost to Russia. The protracted conflict has not only killed thousands of civilians, but has also given Russia control of a large swath of Ukrainian territory, including resource-rich regions like Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea. 30% of the population displaced. The war has forced millions of Ukrainians to seek refuge in Europe, while the birth rate has plummeted, and a significant portion of the working-age population has been dragged onto the battlefield. The economy in freefall. The Ukrainian economy, already unstable, is now almost completely destroyed. The national budget is depleted, while loans and aid from the West come with stringent conditions, turning Ukraine into a long-term debtor. Instead of rebuilding the country, the Zelensky government is focusing all its resources on the war, pushing Ukraine into a deep crisis. Peace, not in the dictionary. Whenever there are signs of peace talks, Zelensky always takes a hard line, rejecting any solution that is not fully aligned with the West. This only prolongs the suffering of the Ukrainian people, while outside stakeholders benefit. The perfect couple in the Ukrainian tragedy. The combination of Biden and Zelensky has created a dream team for NATO, but a nightmare for Ukraine. One is the architect behind every strategic decision. The other is the devoted executor who doesn't hesitate to push his country into a corner. Under their leadership, Ukraine has become the biggest battleground in Europe since World War II, a tragedy with no end in sight. The greatest credit for destroying Ukraine, therefore, must go to this duo. They have not only plunged Ukraine into a full-blown crisis, but have also robbed the nation of the bright future it could have had if it had chosen a different path. In the chaos of the Ukraine conflict, NATO leaders aren't just sending weapons or stirring up trouble. They're quietly waging a different kind of war, an economic one, and it's working really well for them. I'm talking about the energy crisis. This isn't just a side effect of the war, it's the result of clever planning, and the biggest winner isn't Europe, it's the United States. helping America sell energy, a well-calculated strategy. When Russia, one of the world's biggest energy suppliers, got hit with sanctions from NATO and its allies, Europe suddenly found itself in an energy crisis. The NATO leaders knew this would happen. They knew that cutting off Russian energy wouldn't just hurt Russia, it would create a huge opportunity for America to step in and fill the gap, driving energy prices through the roof. The sanctions didn't just target Russian oil and gas, they messed up the entire global supply chain. Energy prices skyrocketed, turning a basic necessity into a luxury. As a result, American energy companies sitting on huge reserves jumped at the chance to make a fortune selling expensive liquefied natural gas, LNG, and oil to Europe. Dependence on America. Europe, used to cheap energy from Russia, now faces a harsh reality. They have no choice but to rely on expensive energy from across the Atlantic. American gas isn't just more expensive. It also means extra costs for shipping and new infrastructure to handle the LNG. And guess who pays for all of that? The people and businesses of Europe. American market benefits. While European businesses struggle with rising production costs, American energy giants are raking in record profits. This isn't just about rescuing Europe. It's about America strengthening its grip on the global energy market, a brilliant move in a long-term strategy. NATO leaders often call on Europeans to sacrifice for the ideals of freedom, but really this sacrifice is way too expensive, and mostly benefits America. Sky-high energy bills. After losing cheap energy from Russia, European energy bills went through the roof. Many families can't afford to heat their homes in the winter, and small businesses are going bankrupt because they can't compete globally. Europe's competitiveness is going down. Expensive energy isn't just affecting daily life, it's also hurting European industries. Factories, from chemicals and steel to cars, have much higher operating costs than their competitors in America and Asia. This is forcing many businesses to move overseas, including to America. Unity or forced hardship. NATO leaders keep talking about unity, but they're the ones who put Europeans in a tough spot. While Americans enjoy cheap energy and an economy boosted by foreign investment, Europeans are working for free, working hard to pay for the political decisions of their leaders. From the ideal of unity to American self-interest. While NATO leaders describe the war in Ukraine as a fight for freedom and democracy, it's really a game where America wins the most. America, the real winner. The energy crisis shows something important. America controls not just the flow of weapons, but also the flow of energy around the world. By supplying LNG, America quickly replaced Russia, becoming Europe's biggest energy supplier and making billions of dollars. Who loses, who wins? Meanwhile, Europe not only faces high energy costs but is also getting weaker strategically. With a declining industry, rising unemployment, and growing public discontent, Europe is paying a high price for being a loyal ally. A perfect strategy at someone else's expense. NATO leaders have shown they're not just good at manipulating war, but also great at turning a crisis into an opportunity. In this power game, America is the clear winner, while Europe, even as an ally, bears the brunt of the consequences. A sacrifice painted with noble ideals, but really just a ruthless and self-serving play. Looking back at the events surrounding Ukraine, it's hard not to laugh at the irony. Russia, the West's sworn enemy, has become an unofficial partner, helping the Biden-Zelensky duo lead Ukraine down a dead-end road. With a carefully orchestrated strategy from the US and NATO, the war has not only devastated Ukraine, but also, coincidentally, helped Russia seize over 30% of its territory. We have to admit, Russia has played a very active role in helping Ukraine get closer to disaster. After NATO's eastward expansion strategy put Moscow in a difficult position, Russia had no choice but to take drastic action. Claiming to protect ethnic Russians in Donbas and ensure national security, Russia launched its military operation in 2022, turning Ukraine into a battlefield. The result? After almost 3 years, Russia controls over 30% of Ukrainian territory, including resource-rich and strategically important areas. Not only that, Russia has turned cities that were once symbols of Ukraine's development into heavily damaged areas, pushing the country back in time. Intentionally or not, Russia has become a perfect partner in the West's plan to destroy Ukraine. Russia's strategy has not only brought real benefits to Russia, but has also exposed the contradictions and limits of US and NATO commitments. In short, the war in Ukraine is not only a costly lesson for the Kyiv government, but also a wake-up call for other countries considering taking sides in the global geopolitical confrontation. And in this tragicomedy, Russia is not just a player, but a key factor in shaping Ukraine's bleak future. Ukraine, from European dream to current nightmare. The war has not only taken tens of thousands of lives, but also destroyed entire infrastructure and disrupted the lives of millions of Ukrainians. Instead of becoming a bridge between the West and Russia, Ukraine is now a divided land where people face food and energy crises and an uncertain future. From Russia's perspective, this war is like a trap that the West has set for itself. Moscow has not only achieved its strategic goals, but also strengthened its international standing, despite sanctions. Meanwhile, NATO and the US are facing huge costs, and Ukraine has become a dead-end buffer zone between the two blocs. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more exciting content. Have a great day!